Good morning.
Good morning.
And welcome back. Thanks to Sarah and Rebecca for the introductions this morning, and to Master Ming Tong for the opening practice this morning. Was everyone here for that? Yes. Good, good. Great way to get grounded in our day together. So here we are, and Sarah mentioned optimism. Is there cause for optimism? I think you might be surprised in the answers that we're gonna uncover today on this incredible panel. I also wanna weave in another question about belonging. Cynthia Bourgeot mentioned this yesterday, and I'm gonna ask this question 3 times because sometimes it takes a little bit to hear something, right? So my question that I'm inviting of this festival and of us here in this session this morning is, what would the world look like if we helped each other remember that we belong? So what would the world look like if we helped each other remember that we belong? What would the world look like if we helped each other remember that we belong? And what do I mean by that? I mean that we belong to each other, that we belong to the earth, that we all belong at the table, that diversity is our strength, and as some wise leaders here in our community have taught us, that we are all creative, we are all resourceful, and we are all whole. And we kind of dove into this yesterday, this idea of our small dualistic minds that have created these systems of oppression that are really, truly built around othering. And yet the forest already knows that we belong. Our brains are actually wired for belonging. And we're all born creative. And as Women Stand Shining said yesterday, we're conditioned to not hear these voices. We're conditioned to not hear the forest. We don't see our own creativity. And we don't remember that we already know that we belong. So somehow we've bought into this lie, and we've institutionalized systems of racism that serve a few at the expense of many. So why are we so optimistic this morning? And what is it going to take to turn it around? And we're so delighted to be gathered here with an esteemed panel of speakers who are going to help us remember in community today. They're going to share an alternative narrative, as Sarah said, and I think they're going to leave us feeling pretty inspired to do the hard work, inspired to do the practice of reprogramming our minds, and remind us to celebrate the joy and creativity of knowing in our hearts that we do, in fact, belong. So let's just talk quickly about format so you all know what to expect if you haven't been here yet. So I will read the bios of these beautiful humans, and I'm going to read them one after another in the order that they're going to speak, but I want you all to hold your applause until I get through, and then we'll give them a big, hearty, warm Louisville welcome. And then each of them has a little bit of time to share with you their perspective, and then we'll chat a little bit. So that's how it's going to work, and without further ado, let me introduce you to Alice Chen, who swept in just moments ago. Hope she's feeling grounded in her 3 minutes. Alice is an internal medicine physician and served as executive director of Doctors for America from 2011 to 2018, when under her leadership, it mobilized a movement of thousands of physicians and medical students in all 50 states to bring their patients' experiences to policymakers. This effort is designed to move the nation to put patients over politics, to ensure that everyone has access to affordable, high-quality healthcare, and the means to lead a healthy life. Since stepping down from Doctors for America, she has turned her attention to climate change and its intersection with health and well-being. She has also served as a Hauser visiting leader at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government Center for Public Leadership. Dr. Chen received her undergraduate degree from Yale and her medical degree from Cornell University. She is originally from the San Francisco Bay Area and currently resides with her husband, Dr. Vivek Murthy, and 2 young children in Washington, D.C. Welcome. And next to Alice, we have Cliff Saron. Cliff is internationally known for his research on the effect of meditation on attention, emotional regulation, brain function, and physical health. In the 1990s, he pioneered the study of Tibetan Buddhist monks' meditation. Saron is an associate research scientist at the University of California, Davis Center for Meditation and Brain.
Mind and brain.
Oh, mind and brain. Thank you. Let's update that. He is principal investigator of the Shamatha Project, the most comprehensive study to date investigating the effects of long-term intensive meditation practice on physiological and psychological processes central to well-being, attention, emotional regulation, and health. Welcome, Cliff.
Thank you.
We also have next to Cliff, Katie Jones, who also goes by KJ.
Yes, ma'am.
KJ is a music curator, artist manager, and talent buyer residing in Brooklyn, New York. Born in the heart of Southern Virginia, KJ's life has revolved around music from a very young age, and she was educated at a performing arts high school in Phoenix. She received a double major in music, business, management, and professional music from Berklee College of Music in Boston. KJ moved to New York City in 2015, where she began working at National Sawdust, and in early spring of 2016, she became a full-time part of the venue's programming team. She is founder of The Revolution, a performance series highlighting Brooklyn and Harlem-based artists and musicians. Her extensive activities also include work as manager for innovative artists, assisting on numerous music festivals around the US. Welcome to Louisville.
Thank you.
And Toby. Toby Herzlich is the founder of Biomimicry for Social Innovation. As a certified biomimicry specialist through Biomimicry 3.8, her focus is on applying nature's genius to leadership, social change, and organizational innovation. She is a senior trainer with the Rockwood Leadership Institute and co-founder of the Cultivating Women's Leadership Training Intensives. She has launched several national collaborative movement building networks, such as the Jewish Social Justice Roundtable and the Young Climate Leaders Network. Toby trains and coaches progressive leaders in the United States and internationally, cultivating skills and practices through which we can collectively create the world we know is possible. She's also one of my teachers, so I'm delighted that she is here with us. So on that note, let us welcome them. So we're going to start our dive into this morning with you, Alice.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm going to stand and I'll have my back slightly to you all, but better to communicate with those in the audience. So good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Oh, so friendly. It is so good to be here with all of you at this Festival of Faith. It's such an incredible opportunity to be in a space where we're bringing together so many faith traditions that help enrich our spiritual existence, as well as the science that helps us understand the physical world around us. Our topic this morning feels urgent as we look at the news. Last Monday, all of us watched the news in horror as Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris was burning. To me, it felt almost like the human spirit and optimism was under attack somehow. We look down to the south of where we are, where a few weeks ago, 3 parishes in Louisiana lost their churches to arson. We think about the families in Sri Lanka and Christchurch that are hurting today, who are missing that special member of their family at their dinner table, will never be back again because of an impersonal hatred that took them away. There are children around the world who are walking out from school because they've realized that the climate is changing and we're not changing fast enough to deal with it, and their futures are at stake. It feels like when we look at these and so many of the other problems in the world that it is quite overwhelming, and it can feel like we are powerless and there's nothing that we can do. So in thinking about this morning's session, I want to reflect a little bit about how we move past that sense of overwhelm. How do we find that we are not insignificant, that we belong, that we have a place in this greater story that we are writing together as humanity? You know, the first thing when I think about how we move forward, how we decide in the morning to get up and make the world better, is focusing not so intently on the problems and the pain and the hurt, but looking at joy and light. My husband Vivek and I have two beautiful babies. Our son Tejas is 2.5. His name means light and illumination in Sanskrit. And our daughter Shanti is 15 months old, and her name means peace. And they have this incredible capacity for joy. Tejas lately has been waking up in the morning and going to his window and looking at this tree outside his window, and he says, "Look, the leaves are coming!" Because in DC, spring is coming. And he's just so excited every day that there are more and more leaves on this tree. And as adults, we would not have noticed. Shanti, on the other hand, is just learning to walk and talk at the same time. And it is so cute. She will toddle around the house, and she'll see our fruit bowl in the kitchen. And she toddles toward it, yelling, "Na, na, 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 na." It is amazing how much joy and triumph a banana brings to her life. What's amazing about children is that they have absolutely no idea the impact that they are having on us when they express this kind of joy. They don't worry about whether or not they have a place in the world. They don't wonder whether or not they matter or whether they belong. They're just living and experiencing their lives. And as adults, we have so much more capacity than a toddler to affect the world around us. But it's so easy to get lost in our modern era of cable news and our smartphones that tell us 24/7 that we're under threat, that somebody is trying to take away our safety, our dignity, our liberty, our happiness. There's so much that we need to be worried about. But I think that's why it's so important for us to remind ourselves to open our eyes to the light that is around us every day. After running Doctors for America for many years, which was an extraordinary experience, I realized that I needed to take a break. I needed to take some time away from all these constant messages that told me I needed to be angry about the world, and I needed to be despondent, and I needed to be shaking my fist at the world at all times. It didn't feel quite like it was sort of my core. And so I stopped checking the news, and I stopped checking social media, and I would leave my phone on the other side of the room and just be. And I discovered that when the noise started to become more quiet, that I could see so much around us that is good, that is beautiful. The laughter of tourists in the heart of DC, where we live. People who are here who travel from all over the world with their extended families to see the sights and learn the history and make memories, and they're not hurting all the time. They're enjoying. I hear these stories from Lyft drivers. I always ask them their stories, and they're always in pursuit of some dream that my ride is helping to fund. Yesterday, I was astounded at the songbirds in Louisville. Just wow! There's so much around us that there is to celebrate, and yet it is so easy for us to forget. There's a professor, Hans Rosling, who published a book last year, posthumously, called Factfulness. And in the book, he explores all the ways that the world is actually better off than most of us realize. For example, extreme poverty feels like this intractable problem that we just can't fix. And yet, did you know that in the past 20 years, extreme poverty in the world has been cut in half? Did you know that 90% of the world's children get vaccines? That 80% of the world has access to electricity? That solar panels cost 1% of what they used to, and that there are major corporations in the world that just have decided that they're going to go renewable, from Walmart to GM to all these other companies? When we look at the problems of the world, it seems like we can't do anything, but there is so much that is already going right. And I think one of the most important things for us to remember is to focus on that as our core. Because I found when I took a step back from all of the negative messages out there, was that after some time, I was able to reemerge and reconnect with the news and the media and everything that's happening in the world from a much happier place, and a place where I felt like, wow, I do have some agency. I can make the world better and kinder. I had this extraordinary experience a few weeks ago where I was walking down the street in DC, and I saw a woman who was she was sitting on the sidewalk, and she had a carrier with a baby in it. And she had a cardboard sign in front of her. And I almost walked by her because I was thinking about something else. But then I suddenly paused and realized there's a fellow mom. She's sitting on the street. What is going on? So I paused and I went to talk to her. And her name is Manuela, and she's the mother of 4. And she, until 2 months ago, lived in Brazil with her husband and their 4 children, and her grandfather, and there were a total of 10 people who were living in one room. And they were in a poor community, and her children didn't really have much of a future. They had poor education, and they felt like they didn't know sort of a good path forward. But they decided that they were going to pick up and travel all the way up here to America. And they got stuck in Tijuana at the border. And she made it through with her kids, but her husband didn't. He was stuck there, and he's doing construction, trying to get to his family right now. She made her way to Maryland, where she's staying with her sister, put her older kids in school, and she started to clean houses, but it wasn't really enough, so she was on the streets, sort of asking for the generosity of strangers for her and her family, so that they could just get over this hump and start pursuing a better future. As we were talking, a part of me was feeling like, wow, I feel kind of good about myself because I've sat down to talk to this woman, and I hope that it's making a difference to her. I hope that she feels like she belongs because someone has taken the time to talk to her. But I was also feeling a bit inadequate. What can I really do for her? And all of a sudden, somebody stopped about 2 feet away from us. And he was a black man with kind of scraggly hair and baggy jeans or baggy sweats and these white socks and sneakers. And he was right there, and we kind of both looked at him, and we were a little nervous. And he reached down into his sock, and he pulled out a wad of cash. And he took out $1, and he handed it to her. And he said, God bless you. Good luck to you. And as he walked away, he kind of happily was sort of saying to nobody in particular, he said, I'm homeless, but I got $20. And that story has stuck with me because I realized in that moment that no matter who you are and what your resources are, that you can bring light to other people's lives. And even if you only have $20 and a little plastic bag of your life's possessions, that there's something that you can offer and something that you can bring to other people's lives. And I hope that as we continue this conversation, that we can remember that all of us have light, and if we go out there and spread that light, that the world can be a better place because of it.
Oh.
So the story you were just telling made me think about something, and I don't know if this honestly came from Toby or not, but maybe Lynn Twist, when she talks about language and how we think of resources, we tend to use the word poor, and we talk about people, that poor person. And the reality is people aren't poor. Situations are poor. And that was a beautiful example of that, and that ability to connect and, what I'm offering is to not have judged that situation before you're even in it. So thank you for sharing that. But one quick question I have before I open up is how do you mentioned stepping away and coming back. Do you have a practice that you utilize in order to maintain yourself, even though you're back in the news media and social media and in those spaces?
Well, fortunately for me, it's almost forced upon me because of our small children. Yeah. And they're just so excited all the time. I mean, when you walk into a room and mama, it's pretty hard to be stuck in darkness. So that is one of the big pieces.
Yeah. So let me invite some conversation from our esteemed panel here.
I just want to say I feel so inspired by your stories, and I can feel my system change in just the way you were describing by hearing your stories, by connecting with empathy, by imagining those people and connecting through my heart, through your heart, to their hearts. I can feel the physiological change that happens there. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think what I will be sharing is very convergent with what you're talking about. And I'm also deeply touched by the joy that's infectious, the contagion, the positive contagion of your family into this room. And you, Bodhi brought this, you brought this as well, Lita. I think what you're touching on is the nature of compassion rather than something that we call empathic distress, which is how the suffering of others comes in and floods us with a sense of despair and hopelessness, but actually the cultivation of a genuine wish to engage with the conditions of the world actually is revivifying. It gives us life. And so I think that your presentation is a perfect setup for considering the nature of what it is to be compassionate.
Totally. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Honestly, I've never really heard from a physician that can kind of take things and put them aside and stand in her own and really talk about rejuvenation, actually say, I need to take a step back from this. This is actually not in the core of my heart, which I think is pretty heavy. I think that we all feel that way, just societally. So I appreciated that honesty and that vulnerable moment from you, allowing us to understand that sometimes, whatever we're standing in our truth might not resonate with us, 100% of the time. And exactly what Cliff's saying, your children, I mean, what a light, and, these future generations are really the core of change, and allowing us to remember that there are bigger things than just social media and these kind of, aspects to a lot of technology and, war and poverty and these really heavy topics. So thank you for keeping it light, but keeping it honest. I think we need a lot more of that, so I appreciate it.
Well, I think it's healthier for all of us if we can just sort of be who we are.
Totally.
Instead of trying to go out and project some image that's not real.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And I think probably so many of us that are in this room today feel like we're out there fighting the good fight, right? For me, for many years, it was approaching this work with such intense passion of protecting the earth, and that I was the only one who could do it, right? And I had to carry that weight, and it was exhausting, right?
Exhausting.
And I felt like I belonged to the earth, but I think the connection I had missed is our broader community, and also that having this space to do the internal work so that I could show up and be even more effective in the things that really drove me. So I bring it back to you. Here you are, You worked to build this nonprofit organization that's doing amazing things, right? Trying to help us make stronger connections and battle some institutions that, you know, perhaps need to crumble a little bit. And you've stepped away from that. You've seen sparks of joy in your children. And so now what? Where are you, you know, where is it coming back into, where are you reconnecting back into this work and bringing your joy into that work? And what does that look like?
So I think it looks like a couple of things. I mean, one of the areas, your area of passion is that piece on climate. And that's an area that's been very interesting to me for my whole life, having grown up in California. It's sort of built into who you are. And looking at it and bringing that element of joy, because it does feel sometimes like it's an arena that's a slog. It's like you're a martyr. You just have to be despondent that everyone's all the articles say it's an existential threat, and it's just so heavy. But there is also so much excitement and creativity and joy in that field. And I think beyond sort of the climate change space is, I hope that I can help more people sort of approach their place in the world from a place of joy and of cultivating that joy in themselves. If you're working on the environment, but you never get to go on a walk in the woods because you're too busy it's Saturday, but I can't go on that walk in the woods, then you're missing it, right? You're missing the very thing that feeds you, and that is the reason that you're doing the work. And so I hope to bring my example to more people so that we can all sort of live our lives as we're trying to change the world around us.
Amen. Thank you. So now we're going to shift gears a little bit. Cliff.
Let's see if I can find the clicker. So I'm deeply honored to the festival, the organizers, and very humbled to be part of this wonderful meeting. And I want to start out with this original artwork done by the daughter of one of our research participants. And you might notice there I am in an idealized body form on the right. And you know, if you look at this diagram and you have the scientists earnestly with their clipboards and lab coats attempting to determine what is happening for real in this practitioner who may be aspiring to liberation. And perhaps you might think that we are trying to reduce that entire process to what we can measure from little squiggles on the scalp. And one of the things that this brings up is the idea that what you're looking at in this diagram are two very different social imaginaries. And social imaginary is a term brought forward by the philosopher from McGill, Charles Taylor, which I think is incredibly useful in conceptualizing, and I am using the term conceptualizing in this context, the ways that we are in the world with common cause, but maybe perhaps different worldviews. And so what Charles Taylor says is, by social imaginary, I'm thinking of the ways people imagine their social existence, how they fit together with others, how things go on between them and their fellows, the expectations that are normally met, and the deeper normative notions and images that underlie these expectations. And different faith traditions, different secular traditions, even different disciplines have different social imaginaries. And the religious studies scholar David McMahon has kind of broadened this notion from individual beliefs to all the way to traditional cosmologies, laying down within different social institutions and physical conditions. So here's an image of colliding social imaginaries. This is a photograph I took 27 years ago at the Institute of Buddhist Dialectics, and back there in the corner, let's see if I can figure out how to, maybe this doesn't have a laser pointer. So there's Richie Davidson in the back, who you'll be hearing from tomorrow, and under the electrode cap is Francisco Varela, who is one of the pioneers of the dialogue between science and Buddhism. And I did not mean to, can I go backward? Yes, okay. So here we are giving an EEG demonstration, and why are these monks laughing? Well, everyone knows the mind is here, and we have this funny cat here. And what have we heard over and over in the last few, day and 2 days is this heart-mind, or, we need to open the mind of the heart. And so this is one of the things that it keeps inspiring me. So 27 years later, I'm still showing this slide. So I want to suggest to you that science itself, we've heard it in very large terms over the last few days. But science is a practice as well. And I want to suggest to you that it's potentially a contemplative practice and contemplative path in itself. And this is something that, oh, thank you. Sorry. Yeah, okay. Just checking. So this is Francisco Varela 8 years before that electrode cat picture, talking in the movie Monte Grande with Joan Halifax. And what he says really has touched me perennially and perpetually. And what Francisco said was science in its core, in its active living core, is pure contemplation. It has little or nothing to do with manipulation. And by manipulation, he's speaking about the turn from the motivation of inquiry into its application of knowledge in the form of technology. The best science, he says, is always done with that kind of delight and enjoyment of the mystery. We know far less than many people think we do, yet we are questing to know ever more of reality. So these different social imaginaries can be in tension, and one of the tensions that David McMahon points out is that when researchers attempt to study using our traditional methods, contemplative practice, we, for practical reasons, and this term, you have to start somewhere, keeps coming up, we often ignore the role of cultural, historical, social, political, religious, and ethical contexts. And as I believe we all understand, this is actually enormously, intricately intertwined with commitments to practice. So if you isolate these practices from these contexts for the sake of scientific study, we inevitably distort how they actually work in people's lives. We can't make sense of contemplative practices in isolation because they are inextricably, systematically intertwined with them. They're part of the life world. And he said this at the Mind and Life Summer Institute in 2016. So quickly, in the remaining few minutes, I want to touch on our research project to bring you in touch with an actual experiment that we did. The Shamatha project involved Alan Wallace, a Buddhist teacher, teaching 2 3-month-long residential retreats. We took a group of 60 people and we randomly assigned them to one of 2 3-month trainings. I met people who were meditating about 6 hours a day. And the primary emphasis of that training was on the cultivation of relaxation, attentional stability, and perceptual clarity. But they also were taught practices relating to compassion and loving kindness. Our motivating question was, how can we engage with and compassionately respond to our own suffering and the suffering of the world as it comes to us? So this is a gigantic project. It's a whole orchestra of investigators and funders. And I'll take you quickly to Colorado. Here was a newly created meditation lodge, and Alan Wallace is teaching in the second of these 3-month retreats. We had a laboratory, and this was our context. This was the stupa that meditators could sit in. That was quite a different context. In terms of emotional responses to suffering, based on the intent of the training, we expect decreasing rejection, decreasing, pushing away, avoiding suffering, and an increased capacity perhaps to feel the sadness that might come up for you when you stop pushing suffering away. How can we approach this experimentally? So the way we do this is we look at evoked emotion by showing difficult films to people and recording their video unobtrusively of their facial expressions. So I'm going to show you some difficult graphic images, and we're just going to behold them, and you can see what comes up for you. But this is a warning. This is a soldier expressing remorse that war was nothing like the video games that he used as part of his training. We take a Talmudic approach to recording facial expression by manually looking at every one of the 46 muscle groups of the face as they move every frame of the video. So what I'm showing you here is the record of just 10 seconds of facial behavior. This can now be done pretty much fairly well by computer. We did it by hand, and it's about 150 times real time to do this. And of course, you can get these different muscle groups put together, and then there's a kind of a motion dictionary that tells you what the facial expression may represent in terms of basic emotions. However, you don't really need to do all that to see that this is a picture of grief. When we do that for this group of 60 people, and we look at sadness expressions, before the retreat, we showed another difficult movie. The trainee and the waitlist control group, they didn't differ on how often they showed sadness expressions or the number of those sadness expressions. After the retreat, in fact, according to what we had predicted, trainees, the retreatants, were more likely to show sadness than the control group. What about rejection emotions? There was no difference in the anger, contempt, or disgust expressions that we found before the retreat between groups. After the retreat, there was actually also no difference in the probability of showing a rejection emotion on the part of the retreatants. However, if they did show anger, contempt, or retreat, they showed fewer rejection expressions. And one of the ways we interpret that is that the arising of a moment of anger, contempt, or disgust can actually trigger a whole host of regulatory responses and reframing as a function of the training, so that they re-engage with the situation and that initial reaction doesn't keep happening. When we looked at what people said they were feeling after the retreat, when we saw them have sadness, they did not report that they had more sadness. What they reported is that they felt sympathy. And we didn't find that in the control group. So rather than meaning sadness, these measured expressions may actually be markers of training-related growth of other-directed empathic concern. So what these data suggest is a qualitative change in the way participants engage with human suffering, which may reflect training-related increased probability of prosociality and the arising of compassion. Thank you.
Thank you. So we can change our minds. We can practice compassion.
Well, we can
Transform.
practice compassion in the situation of this experiment where you are not actually testing how people act in the world. We're looking at their reactions to images of suffering. So we're activating emotion, but we're actually doing it in a laboratory, a simulated context.
Sure.
There are actually very few studies that look at behavior in the world. That's one of the areas of research that really needs to be further promoted. And one of the studies that's been done by David DeSteno's group, a paper by Paul Condon, is a fascinating study. You go into a room and you're going to wait for a test, but there are 3 people sitting, there are 4 chairs, and 3 people are sitting in the chairs. You sit down, and somebody comes in on crutches in obvious pain. Do you give up your seat? So what do you think the percentage is before compassion or mindfulness training? How often will people give up their seat?
I'm afraid to ask.
Yes, well, you should be afraid to ask. 16%.
Oh my goodness.
So now you have people who come in, and they have either gone through a compassion training or a mindfulness training for 6 weeks. That's not a retreat like we were looking at. What percentage of meditators, there's no difference between the compassion group and the mindfulness group on the probability that they will give up their seat. What percent of the meditators will give up their seat?
100.
That's what we would want to hear. 49%. So what's happening here? The social norms of 3 people not budging has a profound unconscious impact on our social behavior, on our behavior. Because it's all stacked. You know, this is a social psych experiment. And so if there was just one chair and if somebody comes in, it'd be totally different data. But the counterweight of social normative behavior and violating a social norm. I mean, you know, I can stand up here and I already had to overcome something to do that, right? Because we're sitting on a couch. And so that doesn't mean that there wasn't 100% impulse. But I think it's very telling. And this experiment has been replicated with Headspace, an app. And it's much weaker. The effect is much weaker.
Reflections?
I'm curious why you think it's weaker with the app. Is there something about collective practice?
Well, I think there's a lot about collective practice, and there's a lot about having a relationship to a teacher, and there's a lot about social support, and there's a lot about actually being with each other in community. I mean, you use this beautiful phrase over and over, and we know that, you know, I mean, even if you're socialized and you're a digital negative, that was a slip. I meant to say native, and I said negative. That's, I think that there isn't a substitute, and even if it's wonderful teaching, and it's not reciprocal, even just your nodding is affecting me. We know there's brain-to-brain coupling in communication. And you and I are more in the same brain state now. And there isn't, at this point in the technology, you know, the iPhone is not nodding back at you. But just wait. USC has virtual reality border agent interviewers, which are in 3D and actually have been tuned to elicit human responses.
Well, and I just, you know, the cover of the Tufts magazine I got is like, you know, we've got artificial intelligence. Can we make it kind?
Yeah.
Can we make it kind? I mean, people are studying this now.
Yeah, it's an issue. Another issue of our times.
Yeah.
Another climate change.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think we're going to move to our creative processes and invite KJ to share with us.
Sure. Hi, you guys. You guys doing okay? Yeah. Okay. You know, a really great artist that I work with in Brooklyn, Amy Leone always tells me, and every person that's always in the room at her performances, you can manifest something and you're one breath away from manifesting the next step of your life. So if you guys don't mind, not to make this a participation scenario, but I'd love it, if we could all just take just a second and really know where we're at. We're all here together, and community is so powerful. I'm gonna act a little casually and just talk to you guys on this couch because that's who I am, and I think we best connect with each other when we're just being our true authentic self. So if you guys wouldn't mind just breathing in with me, and we're gonna exhale and just think of anything, any true intention or any manifestation that you would really have just been sitting on that's kind of maybe eating away at you, or you feel like you haven't had that opportunity today, yesterday, in the last month, in the last year, in 10 years to really activate it. We're gonna activate it today if y'all are all right with that. Everybody cool? Okay, cool. So on the count of 3, we'll just inhale, and then we'll exhale on the count of 3 as well. 1, 2, 3. And 1, 2, 3. Well, I appreciate you guys for being here. I am more than grateful to be here from New York and be on this panel. If you guys are around tonight, I'm just gonna upfront preface because I cannot wait. Jay Horde is an amazing Brooklyn artist, singer-songwriter, Grammy winner. He's gonna be here tonight with his family from 7 to 9 doing an after-hours special of just beautiful gospel soul roots music. This is an extension of what I do at National Sawdust in Brooklyn, but also this is just an extension of family to me. Jonathan is an incredible artist. We went to Berklee College of Music together. I've been knowing him for quite some time, and to be in a festival scenario that's really based around this interconnection of faiths and sciences, when I got approached to help curate a night of music, it was a no-brainer for me. Going back to the points that everyone's talking about, this act of regeneration and rejuvenation and understanding change and how we really connect with people to make that happen. For me, in my work at Sawdust, National Sawdust is, many of you probably don't know, but it's a brand new, a little under 5 years in the making, nonprofit music venue. Kind of an arts incubator as well, but a lot of our work there is truly mission-based to support discovery of local artists and this new resurgence of new music outside of genres at all. It could be anything from classical to new Baroque to hip-hop, spoken word, R&B, rock and roll, anything. But the most beauty about this venue is that it's artist-led. All of us on staff are artists. And I think that really helps us connect to the amount of change that we want to have in the world through music and through this new community of musicians and new community of next generations, as I was talking to Alice about, really activating the power of music and how big of an impact it can have on everyone, from teachers to children to siblings to elders. Anybody really can be truly regenerated and rejuvenated through music. When I started at National Sawdust, I started at the bottom. I had just moved from Los Angeles. I'd just gotten out of Berklee 5 years prior to that, working at Live Nation, doing a lot of the more managerial things, but also writing in a couple bands at that time. When I moved to New York, Brooklyn was a breeding ground for me. It was really, truly the first place that I had stepped into. I'm from a very small town in Southern Virginia, a very conservative, more often than not racist, kind of inkling into this small town US society. I had a beautiful family that was really enriched in music my entire life. My mother and father would play Southern rock and blues in my household starting at 5 a.m. to when we went to sleep. It was just part of what we did. It was part of activating me as a child and understanding, I think, now as a 31-year-old, I can really think back and know that, wow, they were really changing me without knowing that they were changing me, which is so incredible, in such a pure and honest and communicative way. And I really, truly am grateful for that. I had never seen that kind of understanding and compassion and elevation of future generations until I got to Brooklyn. I moved into a house with three female musicians, including myself, four. A saxophone player, an MC, a rapper, and then a vibraphone player. We used to host jam sessions every night, every weekend at our house, and we thought it was a little underplayed until we did one and opened it up to the public and 300 people showed up. And it became a huge party, a huge rager. We had a great time, but that wasn't the point. I think we were more often than not overwhelmed with how much the community needed that, how much the community needed not only musicians, but female musicians to be at this other elevation of understanding. You know, I love everybody, but there is something beautiful about a female and how they connect with other individuals, and how they have this innate understanding of compassion within themselves. You add music to that, it's a whole other level. So within my work there, you know, I really started just throwing these pop-up events. Found a job on Craigslist, no name, new music venue coming to town. We're hosting these interviews at a coffee shop. The venue wasn't even done yet. It was still on the groundworks. And I met with another set of three young ladies that ended up being around my age at the time. Very, very inspiring, but it was a very casual interview when they started talking about the mission of the programming at Sawdust and how it was really supposed to regenerate some kind of resurgence within this local community. You know, when people think about New York and Brooklyn, you know, I think from a small town standpoint, it can be like a little overwhelming. But when you're really in an environment where everyone is really uplifting each other, regardless of race, color, creed, gender, any kind of norm, you have to really, you know, really activate that within yourself. So for me, I started at Sawdust, I started as an usher, I started working in box office just to be around music, just to be around shows again, even though I had really truly connected with a lot of different musicians in college. A lot of them were returning to Brooklyn at that time. So, you know, for us, and for me, being in the box office every day at this venue that began as a very classical new music venue, I started taking notes and I started realizing that there was a lot more change that needed to come from the local community that we were actually living in than just one sector of music. You know, one sector of music is only telling one sector of the story. And in 2017, you know, I just thought that we needed to tell all stories. So I started this music series called The Revolution, and it's pretty much just that. It's a local revolution of young artists that get it, that understand change, that understand how to regenerate innately. You know, they don't need to be taught, it comes to them naturally. And this can come from all facets, I think, of creativity. Even if you're not an artist, you know, from being a producer of events, putting shows on, actually supporting artists. That can be a little bit harder sometimes than actually being an artist. Being able to tap into what they truly need, not just on a physical level, but on an artistic, creative level, on a soul level, really. So I started really trying to tap into these other people in my life, these musicians that I had come in contact with, that I understood were on the brink of something different, that understood that they weren't afraid of change, they weren't afraid of activating that, even if it was going to be a hard road, that they were open to it, you know. So I started curating these multiple band bills. Currently, I'm on my 38th volume, so it's been about a little over 3.5 years. I just had my 3-year anniversary a couple months ago. And basically thank you. Yeah. But it started really just one bill, 3 different bands. I want to showcase 3 different genres, and I want them to be different people. I don't want to curate 3 rock and roll bands that all look the same, that do the same thing. I wanted different people to mingle and almost rejuvenate and regenerate and change within just a 2-hour period. I wanted people to activate each other and be a part of the conversation in a creative way. So I started booking a jazz ensemble with a solo singer-songwriter with a hip-hop MC from the Bronx, or a classical violinist with a electronic lute player that's going to sing some and play a violin with a 18 player brass band. Because a lot of conversations come, and I know that we all know this, we were just sitting in a green room together ourselves, when you're sitting there right before the moments of the big change happens. When people take the stage, when people are walking up, they're already setting that intention, and you're already a part of that process without even knowing it. And I think we're all there are a couple of moments on stage, that moment where the music's about to begin and you're like, what's gonna happen? This is exciting. Even to the point where a band's on stage, this is my mom's favorite moment of life, when the bandmates start talking to each other and nodding like, that was dope, that was good. These moments where you're connecting as humans, and even from outside of the curating standpoint, from being an artist and really a composer, a songwriter, how do we activate each other within those kind of patterns? How do we commit to the change that needs to happen within these songs that we're creating? And being touched by that, being open to feedback from our community. So I just continued that journey. I continued that with the programming team at Sawdust, and Jonathan Horde, who you'll see tonight, is an extension of that, an artist that really gets change within the community, an artist that really activates what we know to be this pure understanding of love, of heartfelt compassion, of being okay to cry behind a microphone, to let everybody know that you're hurting, that we're not okay, and to stand in that is pretty powerful. For us to be vulnerable as a community, for us to uplift each other, that's just the key right there. I do a lot of management for artists and for a lot of my best friends, because I really do believe that not only is there power in numbers, but there's power in community, there's power in knowing someone really well and supporting them. I never like to say I'm a manager, I'm a supporter of artists, period. I'm here to help. I'm here to facilitate, I'm here to put the dots together. If you don't want to answer an email, I love email. I'm happy to do it. If you don't understand, okay, great, I have this 2-hour set that I need to do. I know what I'm going to do for 40 minutes, but I don't really know how to activate or communicate or connect with the audience after this point. I can help facilitate that. Who else can we put on the bill that can reactivate you again, who can regenerate, a new conversation that still needs to be had? And these are all just extensions of that process, from being a producer, a curator, a composer, just a creative in general, and really setting that intention for yourself. Outside of being just an artist, I think we're all, as HALIDA was saying, I think we're all creative in some way. And I think it's our duty, especially right now, to support future generations and being okay to create again, be okay to have that voice in the community, be okay to expand, and really live out their dreams, regardless of how uncomfortable it makes everyone feel, and it might not be the norm, but the norm's not that fun. So I'm okay with not being the norm. I'm okay with that. Just the last bit, I really challenge myself every day to, and we were just talking about this last night, which I appreciated the both of you saying earlier, is that having this overarching thing that I have to do this alone, that I have to bear this weight, alone. And I think the more people that we empower artistically, the more that we won't feel like that anymore. And that's really my purpose here. And that's really, I think, National Sawdust's purpose. I think tonight you'll see that's Jonathan Horde's purpose. It's his family's purpose. And I really hope that we can continue to highlight that purpose within a lot of different aspects of the creative process. So thank you.
I I think you'll probably get a resounding affirmative from most folks here that the norm is not working. And even this gathering itself is probably pretty countercultural and radical. But we at the festival are certainly committed to celebrating the arts community, to celebrating creativity, to being vulnerable, to being present, to building community, to all of the things that you talked about. And I saw a lot of smiles and nodding head from Toby, so I want to give her a minute to reflect.
I just love what you're doing, and I just want to hold up props. You said you're 31, which to me seems like you're so far ahead already. Like you're so far down this road, and thank you for doing that. And this is, we are passing to a generation of creative people who are recreating our world and regenerating our world in new ways that are just so powerful, and I just so appreciate what you're doing. Thank you
so much. That really means a lot to me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I was struck. You kept saying change.
Yeah.
Change, and I wanted to hear what was changing, and then you answered, love, in all forms.
Yep.
And permission.
Yep.
To be in all ways.
Totally.
And I thought that was beautiful.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I just love how you're, I feel like often we think about music and art as being something that if you're either a platinum record holder or you're one of us who just listens.
Yeah.
And I just love the way you've brought music back to the personal and the community and anybody, the way you've curated it so that different, you don't have to look a particular way or play a particular instrument. You can create and just be, and that's part of the community. I just love that.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, I'm glad it comes across.
Yes, it does.
Thank you so much, you guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
So tonight will be unexpected,
Yes.
maybe a little uncomfortable, and a big celebration, right?
It'll be amazing.
Yeah.
Definitely
So
make it out.
Don't miss that. Last but certainly not least.
Do we get a little stretch break?
Oh, we do. The master facilitator remembers. We get a little stretch break. Don't go anywhere. We're just going to bring the house lights up, stand for a minute. Yeah, run. Can you run back?
Well, good morning.
Morning.
It is so wonderful to be in the room with you, people who put faith at the center of your lives and who are asking the big questions. I feel just very honored and privileged to be part of this gathering. Thank you. And I have a question for you. What if you had a source of wisdom, a teacher, a mentor, who'd been around for a really long time and who had mastered the big challenges that we're trying to figure out about how to live here on Earth? What if you had that mentor? What would you ask? Seriously, it's a real question. I want you to bring a question to mind about what you would bring to this ancient mentor that would help guide you in your work of faith, in your work of service, in contributing to this threshold moment that we're at now. We'll come back to that. But think of a question. And I'm here to propose to you that nature and the biological and ecological principles that are embedded in life itself could be that teacher. And I want to make really clear from the start, I am not a biologist. I am not a scientist. I was a kid in high school who wanted to free these guys and set them loose instead of dissecting them, right? My work is with people. For the last 25 years, I've been facilitating change processes with people and groups, bringing out the collective intelligence of organizations and networks, the collective intelligence of diverse groups of people who can think together about this new world we're trying to create. But I am a gardener. And I am a lover of the natural world. That's where I go to renew my own faith. That's where I go to ground into the forces of life that are larger than just me. And I've always had the sense that there's a collective intelligence there too that we can learn from, that we can apply to our own challenges. I had to show you some baby pictures from my garden. This is what's happening right now. The leaves are coming. The leaves are coming in my garden. So I'm not a biologist, but I am studying biology. And one of the things that I've learned is that of all the species that have ever lived on Earth, only 1% still remains. The other 99% have gone extinct or have evolved into a new form. So that means that the organisms and the systems that are around with us now are the survivors. And they've honed ways of living together within the selection pressures and the challenges of life on Earth now. And they have a lot to teach us about how to be here for the long haul. These wisdom keepers who've been around longer than we have. Life has been evolving and adapting for 3.8 billion years on this planet. We've heard the number 14 billion years since the Big Bang, and 3.8 billion years of that has been life evolving. And we are part of that. We belong to this. We are nature. So if we're trying to figure out how to live here sustainably as part of this evolutionary ecosystem, why not turn to the planet herself for guidance? That's what I've been asking myself. Aren't there things we can learn from ecosystems that we can apply to our human systems as we're trying to get through this threshold moment? A number of years ago, I came upon a design discipline called biomimicry. Anybody ever heard of biomimicry? A few, okay. So biomimicry is the practice of turning to the natural world for guidance, of studying the genius in nature and then applying that toward innovation in our own sustainability challenges. So designers have been asking, how would nature do this thing that I'm trying to figure out how to do? So those two pictures on the left, there were architects and designers who were saying, how does nature cool buildings in a hot environment without burning fossil fuels? And they turned to the genius of the termite mounds to develop a ventilation system for this building that was built in Zimbabwe that uses no artificial cooling mechanisms. They're asking, how does nature move efficiently, flow through water and air? We're trying to design wind turbines that are as efficient as possible. And they looked to the humpback whale and the fin of the humpback whale and discovered that by putting bumps on the front, they could design a fan for a wind blade that moves more efficiently and gives us more energy. They're asking, how does nature get energy directly from the sun? And now we're designing solar panels that operate the way a leaf does. Lots of breakthrough innovations in engineering, design, green architecture. I started biomimicry for social innovation because I wanted to extend this dialogue to include the people piece. So I've been engaging with policymakers, with entrepreneurs, with organizers, with educators, social benefit leaders, and we're asking different kinds of questions. We're asking, how does nature communicate and exchange information in meaningful ways? How does nature self-organize so that we can quickly come together the way we need to? How does nature cooperate across difference? How does nature adapt when things seem to be getting more complex? Indeed, what can we learn from the healthy, thriving ecosystems that are all around us about how to come together in new ways? These seem like worthwhile questions. So as I've been looking at the reflections that we can get from the natural world, particularly around this question of regeneration, today's topic, what I'm finding is that there are lessons that we can apply at three different levels. At the level of self and personal renewal, at the level of systems and institutions that we're part of, and at the level of how can we support the regeneration of the planet itself. There's lots to share, but I thought I'd seed some ideas at each of these levels if you're interested in that. Is that worthwhile? Should we do that? Okay, so first personally, most of us would benefit from spending more time outside. We've been taking people, organizational people, people from groups, leaders, all different kinds of people, out into the natural world to study how nature works, understand those deep principles and then bring that intelligence back into their workplace. And there are biomimics being spread and propagated through all kinds of different organizations, large and small, and they're experimenting with changing human social systems through this intelligence. Underneath it all, what I'm discovering is that just being outside in that way transforms people. When I turn to nature as my teacher, I develop a different kind of humility, a different orientation, maybe even a different neurological experience in myself. I have a sense of belonging. People's lives are changing just from being outside in this deliberate, humble way. And it's good for us. Recently was published a compilation of studies that looked at 290 million people and shows definitively that direct exposure to the natural world has all kinds of health benefits. It reduces cardiovascular disease, reduces type 2 diabetes, it reduces premature death, it helps with all kinds of things, lowers stress, extends our life, all kinds of things that comes from being in the natural world. It's clear now, it's proven, it's good for us. Even just a 5-minute dose of being in nature can reduce our cortisol levels, that's the stress hormone that we're interacting with every day, and increase happiness and well-being. 5 minutes. So this is a form of regeneration. Let's take ourselves outside more. When we start looking at the level of systems and communities and institutions, there are many principles that have evolved through natural selection in ecosystems that we can learn from and we can apply to our own systems. This represents a body of work by my colleagues at Biomimicry 3.8 who have looked across all the biological literature and distilled 26 life's principles that all organisms live by. I call this the operating guidelines for being an earthling. 26 principles is a lot, so I'm continuing to distill and have narrowed this to 6 leadership practices that if we are to fully embody and embrace, we will be guiding our own systems to operate in ways that are inherently more sustainable and contributing to the evolutionary processes of Earth. Practices like this: cultivating cooperative relationships, find value through win-win interactions. We can study and understand the intricate web of mutualisms that exist in the natural world across all kinds of unusual allies and apply those strategies to our relationships and to our networks. We're working with a rainforest protection NGO in Canada right now that's named Canopy, and they have worked with us to deeply study what's going on in nature and then apply those strategies to building partnerships with corporations that use forest products as their raw materials. So they're building these transformative, reciprocal partnerships that turn these folks who are forest destroyers into champions of long-term forest health. It's amazing work. Here's another practice: use feedback loops. We can mimic nature, we can learn from nature's principles and create flows to learn, adjust, and self-regulate right within our own systems. And I actually believe that improving the feedback loops within our organizations is the single biggest intervention that we can make to improve what we're all trying to do together collectively. Self-organization and emergence. In the natural world, there's no one at the top, the CEO, who's telling everybody else what to do. It's happening from the ground up. And life has evolved simple rules that help everything flow and move toward a greater sense of systemic alignment. I think we can do that too. And in terms of today's topic about regeneration, there's a principle from life: maintain integrity through self-renewal. Biological systems have evolved systems of self-renewal that actually rely on disturbance and disruption to start a regenerative process. We can learn from that. In fact, I think that yesterday's session on climate change maybe brought home that to be partners with the natural world in these times means we're going to have to learn how to navigate disruption. And perhaps disruption is actually the divine hand of regeneration. It starts the process of change. Even though it may be shocking, something new can be born from that. When a forest fire comes through, the energy that's been bound up gets released and dispersed, and those nutrients can be used in different ways so that a new cycle can emerge from that. After a fire, the land immediately starts healing itself. First with plants that come in quickly, that make lots of seeds, that hold the top layer of the ground, and that just build life into the system and keep the top layer from blowing away. And then that paves the way for the next more complex matrix of shrubs and trees to start to move in. I live in the Intermountain West, where fire is a necessary and important part of our ecosystem, and these aspen trees are the first ones to move in. Their whole root system is underground. They pop up, and they start holding the soil at a deeper level. And then they set the stage for more plants to come in and more organisms to come in that build soil fertility. And then eventually, the slow-moving conifers, who've been protected by those aspen trees, can slowly come back and complete that matrix in the ecosystem. Here's the cool part. Each set of ecosystem members prepares the ground for the next set, creating optimal conditions for the next ones that are coming, even though it becomes no longer suitable for themselves. So I'm wondering if we can learn something from that. Can we be creating the conditions for the next generation, even if it looks like something that we don't recognize as being comfortable or what we're used to? I think we need to get used to disruption and disturbance. I think a lot of the edifices of the 20th century are starting to crumble, and I don't just mean buildings, I mean some of our economic systems are changing, some of our political systems are changing. We have to get comfortable with things falling apart. And we are confronting life-shattering consequences of global climate change. This is happening in our world right now. But the human spirit is strong. And we have something in us about regeneration. This is an image of a young man in Nepal right after the earthquake there a few years ago. We will rise again. The disturbances that are happening now on Earth are calling us to create a future that is more aligned with nature. These are images of what the cities of our future are being imagined as, more integrated with nature, more using and being in partnership with the processes and the benefits of the natural world. In fact, there's a movement that's starting to pop up all over the world that's coming out of the biomimicry world called generous cities, where planners and designers and people creating our built environment are asking, can we create our built world so that we're providing the same kind of ecosystem benefits that the natural world around us does? Can we be partnering with nature and mimicking nature to sequester carbon, to purify air, to cool temperatures, the way the wildlands around us are doing all the time? Can we create that kind of reciprocal partnership? And we're doing it. We're starting in our communities, in our cities, to create ecological regeneration and the cultural regeneration that goes with that. When we start talking about the planetary level, I want to leave you with a very practical solution for creating a resilient future. I think that soils may be the biggest call for regeneration right now, the regeneration that needs to happen in our soils. The carbon that used to be and should be in our soils has been dispersed and is now in our atmosphere, and it's causing a lot of trouble. And there have been many scientific reports that have come out lately, the recent IPCC report, several others, that say that even if we stopped carbon emissions right now, we still have to deal with all the carbon that's in our atmosphere and reduce that in order to avoid catastrophic climate upheaval. That's just gotta happen. And they point to agriculture, forestry, working lands as the most affordable and technologically ready ways to do that. And that's referred to as carbon farming. There's a growing movement, agroecology, all over the world that's creating real human food security while deliberately drawing down carbon through those agricultural methods and locking it up in our soils. So it creates larger yields, it gets people into the land and their traditional methods of growing, and it creates a healthier planet. This has to happen at scale. It has to happen all over the world in large and small efforts. And it's something that we can all be part of in our own backyards, in our schools, in our institutions, in our municipal open spaces. If you have any land at all that you can plant and tend, you can be part of this carbon farming movement. And it's a way of both mimicking nature and partnering with nature to harness the power of photosynthesis to capture carbon and trap it back in our soils, where it needs to be. This is a man named Eric Toensmeier who wrote a book called The Carbon Farming Solution. And he says that in his tiny 1/10 of an acre backyard in the UK, he can sequester as much carbon as one American adult creates in a year. We can develop the skills to partner with the natural world and align ourselves more with natural systems. And my question to you is, can we take this on as our evolutionary responsibility? Each in our own way, each in our own local environment. It's happening in Louisville. These are images of people in your community who are planting trees as part of your tree protection ordinance to cool the city and address the urban heat island effect. Go Louisville. You all are right out on the front of things. Love it. My vision is that we have a resurgence of the Victory Garden movement from World War II, where people came together to fight the war, to be part of victory in the war movement. We can come together to be part of victory in the earth regeneration movement. And I think with the science we have now, we can have optimized intelligence for what are the best carbon sequestering plants for you to grow in your area that can do this work. So it's both a collective and a distributed way of people really expressing their faith in the future. So, let's come back to your question. I want to bring some of this biological intelligence into the room right here for us to address the part of this threshold moment that you're part of. So I want you to bring your question back to mind. And we're going to use a tool that I've developed called Life's Principles Leadership Cards to help other folks who are not biologists to be able to connect with the natural world and get a little bit of specific nature intelligence. And we're going to play Nature Tarot. So hold your question in mind. And before we actually start, we need to do things, we can't lead alone. We need to, and by the way, when I say leadership, I'm not talking about the person sitting in the C-suite. I'm not talking about the dude up there who's calling the shots. I'm talking about us. I'm talking about all of us. I'm talking about people who clear a Friday morning to come and learn more about how they can be part of regenerating faith in this world and action. So just make eye contact with somebody sitting next to you. And because we can't do this alone, we're going to need some partnership. So just do a little like, you're going to be my partner for this. There we are. Okay. And now everybody is going to get one of these cards. So here's how this is going to work. You hold your card, you hold your idea in your heart, you bring your mind into your heart, as we learned to do yesterday. And you're all going to get cards too.
We have cards.
And so I want you to take your right hand and reach down right under the armrest on your seat. Although not in the first row, sorry you guys, I took yours. You'll have to get one from the row behind you. You'll find a little green envelope that looks like this, that's tucked into your chair.
Oh boy.
And if you don't have one, raise your hands real big so that people can bring you one. There should be one tucked into every chair. Did you get one? Good. You guys each get one.
Oh. Take one and pass the next.
So exciting.
Yes.
Will I get a...
We're trusting the magic of the universe here to give you a card that has meaning for your question. Sometimes it's very obvious, sometimes it's a little more obtuse, sometimes your partner has your question and you have their question. So open your envelope, read your card, see what kind of wisdom it has for you, and then we'll just take a couple of minutes to share with your partner what you each came up with. Thank you for raising the house lights. You'll notice that on the back of your card is a little story from your natural mentor and a provocative question for yourself. I'm so curious about what you came up with. So if you got a Nature Tarot card that's perfect for your question, come see me afterwards and we can talk about it. Or if you're wondering, come see me afterwards and we can talk about it. So if you're interested in this work, if you want to learn more about it, we do have 2 workshops coming up. One in June in Slovenia, in the Slovenian Alps. Quite a treat. Just been named the most sustainable country by National Geographic. And another that is a retreat for women in northern New Mexico in July. So come talk to me about it, I can give you more details. I want to leave you just with 2 quotes. One from your native Kentucky son, Wendell Berry. Woohoo! Wendell says, "The care of the earth is our most ancient and most worthy, and after all, our most pleasing responsibility. To cherish what remains of it and to foster its renewal is our only hope." And then finally from Janine Benyus, who's kind of the mother of biomimicry. She wrote the book Biomimicry, Innovation Inspired by Nature, and she's a friend and colleague of mine, inspiration for this work. She says, "We're looking for a vision of a world that works and a practical pathway to get there. It's all around us." I'll leave you with that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Toby.
Thank
What did
you.
you get?
Thank you. I've done this before and I love it every time. And if you want the full deck, Toby did bring full decks of the cards and they'll be in the bookstore, just so you can note for afterwards. I asked the question that I'm going to ask of you in just a second, so I'll ask it out loud and then, let's see, should I tell you my answer or should I wait until you answer?
Let's see what happens.
Yeah, let's see. So the question I have, which was one of the questions I started this conversation with, is, do we have cause for optimism?
That's a great question.
Do we have cause for optimism? What do you all think?
I mean, just look at this. Look at this. How can you not be optimistic when that's in the world that we live in?
Yep.
It's easy when we're in an auditorium like this, when we don't see the sun and we don't smell the flowers, but I love that. Go out to nature and see what she has.
Right.
I mean, I think if we don't have optimism, we're doomed.
No, I agree. Not much to add. But I absolutely agree with that. I mean, I feel like optimism is the key to the next level of what we need to reach, and how we regenerate as a humankind, human society. And I needed that reminder to go outside. So thanks for that. Definitely.
You know, when I first saw this panel, I was like, what do we all have in common? But now I've been sitting with it and I've been getting to know you all a little bit and just loving you all. And I'm reminded that it's only really within our lifetimes that this kind of meeting of the ways has even been possible, and that we're putting attention toward it. The meeting of the spiritual ways, only in our lifetime, and the real integration of arts and creativity, neuroscience, healthcare, doctors talking about joy, like, wow, nature. This is new stuff. This is a new mashup. This is the next generation. This is the more complex ecosystem. So I think there is a lot of reason for optimism, because it's only by coming together in these different ways and looking to different sources of inspiration that we're going to bust into this, through this threshold moment, to whatever it is we're creating next.
And so the card, Toby, that I got
Yes.
was cultivate cooperative relationships. Right? So just, I think that too, and I hope that intentionally or unintentionally, we put together this surprising panel. This, on the face of it, why would these people be sitting here talking to you about this?
Yeah, I think we all had the same.
Right? But that's our small mind, forgetting that we're all connected. The founder, one of the founders of our organization has pioneered this health and harmony circle, this reminder of what wholeness is. I hope everyone is wearing one. I don't know if Christy's here. I can't see anyone in the audience right now, but you know, you need to get your pin and put it on and remember about cultivating a culture of abundance, right? Yeah. And cooperation.
And belonging.
And what?
And belonging.
And belonging, and belonging. Right. Yeah, so amazing. That was such a great exercise. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Mama Earth.
Thank you, Mama Earth. So we have just a few minutes here to kind of wrap up together and reflect back on our conversation this morning and kind of just weave it back together, which we sort of just did. But another question that comes to mind for me and from our team is, you know, the real, I crown you all practical visionaries, right? Vision pools, like give us the vision and let's be very practical about it. We just heard from Nature and from Toby, you know, some real precise things we can do. But I'd love to hear from all of you about, you know, what is it going to take to get us there, to get us through this next threshold, to get us into cooperative relationships, and how can we weave in the data, the arts and culture and, you know, health, well-being, the joy of the next generation. As Mary Evelyn has been saying to us, this intergenerational handshake, you know, can we weave this all together in some practical ways of what we can do to get there, to get where we want to be? Who feels inspired to start? Cliff?
Well, I've been thinking about this optimism, and I've been thinking about the reality of suffering in the world, and this sort of paradox of the tension between this instinctive wanting to push it away and perhaps see the beauty of the flowers and turn away from our simultaneous awareness of the immense suffering in the world. Mm-hmm. And I think there's something very practical about sort of being, you know, that comes to mind, the electronic paper in your Kindle Paperwhite is actually a little ball that has a black side and a white side, and it flips based on electrostatic fields very quickly. And that's electronic ink. And I think we have to use some kind of metaphor like that to develop a fluency of not failing to step into this pool of suffering and understanding that it's not going to swallow us up, that we have a capacity to immerse ourselves in the conditions of the world, and then almost simultaneously invert that into a sense of this genuine desire to relieve that suffering through all of the different variegated talents and capacities and means that we have. And for every single person, that's going to be unique. That's what I think that is both spiritual and practical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think in the contemplative practice, probably in the Buddhist practice, it would be that recognition that there is suffering, but I'm not that suffering. I am not suffering. I can experience it without being it. Yeah. And it's not easy. That's not an easy practice, but it is a necessary one.
So can I just tell you one more thing? Because what you just said, with my wife, this cellist Barbara Bogatin, we do a workshop on the Buddha, the brain, and Bach. And we talked to Yo-Yo Ma about how he holds Bach. Cool. And he said, Bach is kind of communicating in this Lutheran Leipzigian way. I see your suffering. I am not your suffering. Exactly the same sense comes from our discussion with Yo-Yo. So I want to even interfaith that observation.
Yeah, just adding to what you're saying, I think just continuing to humble ourselves and be okay to see the reaction or the action out of reaction, and continuing the conversation,
continuing to be a supporter. For me, I think the biggest takeaway is to never stop listening. Never stop listening in every capacity of the word. Never stop listening to things that you don't know, that make you uncomfortable, that you might learn something new, and have a new idea of how we can change things. And I think that's really the basis of a lot of the arts and a lot of creatives in general is just, and especially with music, you'll miss something if you stop listening. So just never do that.
Amy?
So one of the things that I'm thinking about is I love this idea of the sort of the ecology where everyone's contributing to each other, even if it's not contributing to yourself, and how and thinking about the sort of the power of the arts and the music and of these contemplative practices that sort of like bring us, sort of allow us to sort of open ourselves up more to the people around us. I think one of the things that we grapple with right now is the divisiveness that we see around us all the time. My little card has a beaver on it who's starting from the bottom up. If you want to tackle something big, you start with a stick. And I think that we should all challenge ourselves to have more conversations and reach out more to people who are different. Like this panel is so interesting because we're all so different, right? And I've learned so much from each of you. But I think it's so easy to just imagine, oh, these people think this way. That faith believes this, and just put my own sort of view on that person. But we really can't. We can't build and we can't connect unless we challenge ourselves to actually just sit down and have that conversation and be willing to say, I don't know anything about being an artist in Brooklyn. Tell me, be my teacher. And approach one another as teachers as opposed to adversaries.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll build on you, Amy. One of life's principles is optimize diversity. And we all talk about diversity a lot now, especially in groovy social benefit circles. But I think if we really look at what that means, if we really take it as a personal practice to reach across, every one of us has talked about optimizing diversity in some way. But if we go deeper with that and really look at where is the full ecosystem that I'm part of not whole? And how can I use the resources I have, the privilege I have, the opportunities I have to make it whole again? Who's not here? Which voices am I not listening to? And notice the impulse, which is kind of wired into us, to be afraid, and then to let that go through all the things we've been learning here these last few days, move our brain into our heart, and reach across in a different way. I think if we practice that, like really take it into heart, and practice optimizing diversity, making the conditions suitable for others, where it may not be comfortable for ourselves, that's how we're going to knit this whole that we're currently living in, kind of what often feels like a fragmented state. And that means looking at human supremacy as well. How do we enlarge this circle? How do we expand our sense of what we include as we in a real way?
There's a practice of in consciousness. We talked a lot about consciousness last night and weaving the devotional music, and I feel like somebody asked the question of, can we get to this sort of unity consciousness? And I believe that we're heading in that direction. And when I look at my children, their level of consciousness is just, it's beyond me, and I'm so inspired by their ability to teach me. I am their student as much as I am their mother. And that's such a gift. But there's this practice of transcend and include, right? We have to rise together. We have to move cohesively into this next space. And so I guess my question is, or thoughts on what are we going to take with us? What are we including? Hopefully everyone, but are there some wisdom pieces that you might offer to this transitional space we're going to?
I want to say, can you repeat the question? Because we're all like,
I want to be sure we don't leave nature behind.
Yeah.
yeah.
I want to be sure we don't leave nature behind. We are living in a very perilous time in that way. And that's why I think it's so important that we change our relationship to the natural world to be one of our teacher. Because the way I relate to my teachers just carries something different with it. Yeah. And we need these teachers. We're just waking up to it. Let's not lose them now. We need these teachers.
Right. And let me reframe in the sense that, okay, I have a tendency to be like, all right, we've got an island, you're off. Okay, that's not going to work.
No, but
I'm not kicking you off the island. That's not fair. Come on, but it's sort of like we must move forward together.
Right.
How are we going to do this?
Thank you for that clarification. So I think we have an uphill battle because our natural tendency and our biological organization is the creation of in-groups and out-groups. Mm-hmm. And as soon as we have fellow feeling, we also have exclusion created. Mm-hmm. And it's an enormous challenge. And the idea of not leaving nature behind is a wonderful way that kind of could soften our natural creation of boundaries between us and them, if we realize that we're all nature. But it's very hard in the heat of the moment to remember that. So I think that education and your children and the next generation and young people are teachers in ways that are really, really profound and powerful now. I'm learning so much from my children and recognizing in relief. I think someone said yesterday, we're just beginning to teach the history of our country. I was raised in a very ideal, we did not know so much that is real. Growing up, we got a very cleaned narrative. And that's carried forward in people who are older. Mm-hmm. And there aren't really good tubes between truth and our idealized conceptions of where we come from. So I think we need to make those.
So, Alice, any final thoughts, wisdom, expressions?
I was just thinking back to your original question about belonging. And I think we often think about belonging as something that other people give to us. They say, okay, you belong, you're in, you're on the island, or you're off. And it occurs to me that there is a part of belonging that is us having to remind ourselves constantly that we do belong, and hold our space as though we do, as though we do belong. Because when we feel like we belong, then we look at the environment around us, whether it's people or the planet, and it's just a different kind of relationship. It's not so much of I'm not sure if I should be here, but like I am here and I am part of this. Let's make it work together. That's my thought.
Thank you. Absolutely.